Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first SOMM TV podcast of 2023. Happy New Year. Feeling a little rough. I'm here with our very own Claire Coppi, and we're going to do something fun for you today. We're going to do an oral history of The Hangover. Something that, if you're listening to the SOMM TV podcast, you're singing right now. You're going, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," and you're living it like we are. Claire, I think before we get into the history of The Hangover, what it means, why it happens, on this podcast, we're going to do all sorts of stuff. We're going to deal with that stuff. We're going to call an actual medical doctor, pipe him in, and have him try to explain what's vastly unknown, but try to explain kind of what's happening to our body when it happens. But before we do that, I want to, I just got to plug SOMM TV. You should be a subscriber to SOMM TV, sommtv.com. And you can watch this podcast if you are a subscriber because it is live, and you can look at us. We are not our most beautiful state at the moment.
Claire, I think we're beautiful.
That's right, Claire. Let me ask you, just you and I here. Are you someone who's frequented the hangover term? Do you get those? Certain people are prone to them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like when I would say late 20s, they started becoming rude, and now they're just plain vicious as I get into my mid 30s here.
Oh, you're still a baby. People listening who are in their like mid 40s and 50s are like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, you have no idea."
Well, hopefully I'll be wiser by then, and I won't be pulling the same shit that I'm pulling now.
Well, I just sort of thought, hangovers. I don't think I ever drank water in college, not one glass in 4 years. And I thought that was the reason I sort of got them. But it turns out the reasons we get hangovers are a combination of obvious things and completely unknown physiological reasons. And so, Claire, can you recall maybe the worst hangover you've ever had or something really bad story-wise? We'll start with kind of our personal connection to this and if we've ever learned from our mistakes.
Clearly haven't learned from my mistakes, because that's always the thing, right? You have the hangover and then you're like, I'm never drinking again. And maybe you don't drink again quite like that for months, maybe even a year. But inevitably, you do it. You don't learn.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
It
comes back.
It comes back.
I have said that to my wife many times. I'm never drinking again. And by 4 p.m., she's like, "Well, we'll get into what our cures are, but give me a little bit about let's get into Claire here. Do you have a story? Do you have a let's get into Claire's history with hangovers. Do you have a story with your hangover background?
Like my hangover background? Well,
yeah,
I'd say it started at 21.
Yeah, I'm
it
sure
started before 21.
You're from Chicago.
Yeah, but I was
chance.
Invincible then. You're invincible when you're a kid, so you don't have hangovers. My worst one, though, there's a worst, for sure. I traveled to Alsace for my 30th birthday with my dear, dear friend Christina. She's not in the wine industry, but she wanted to go to a wine region with me for my 30th birthday because she's an angel. We're in Colmar, and a couple winemaker friends of mine who are winemakers in Paso just happened to be in Colmar the same week. So we're like, oh, we gotta meet up for like drinks and dinner and all this. And we drink some beers, we go to dinner, we're drinking a bunch of like stupid Alsatian Grand Cru deliciousness. And then they're like, come back to our Airbnb, like we have a fuck ton of wine. And the wife says, because it's a married winemaking couple, and the wife says, oh, but she's like, we really can't go later than midnight because we have to wake up early and drive to Lyon. So we're like, yeah, no worries. Didn't roll out of that place till 4:30 earliest. And my friend and I don't recall leaving, don't recall getting back there. I do recall vomiting into the toilet. And in a lot of small French apartments, the toilet is in the same room as the washer dryer. So after I vomited a little bit in the toilet, I leaned up against the washer and fell asleep, and then couldn't make it. And by make it, I mean turn around to the toilet. So I just vomited down the side of the washer. And I collapsed into bed, full makeup, shoes still on, everything. Woke up, eyelashes hanging off. looking real rough. And it's a Sunday the next day. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this. In small towns in Europe, everything is closed. And we have no food. And we are dying. And I figure out that the local, somehow, Domino's is still open till 2 p.m. And it's like 1:15. So I call and in broken French order us wings, pizzas, and these pizzas have like little wheels of brie on them. Gorgeous. And we inhale that, go to our separate bedrooms. And fortunately, we didn't have any wine tastings booked that next day. Otherwise, that clearly would not have happened. But yeah, that was a bad one. That was a really, really bad one. Oh my God.
So it was just a combination of a bunch of Alsatian wines. That's what it was.
I want to say yes. Who knows? I could have been drinking ouzo by the end of that night. I really couldn't tell you. But I'm mostly Riesling.
I'm terrified to tell, every single one of you listening to this podcast have stories you don't want public. And luckily it's just Claire and I here. But
tell us.
Well, most of my stories are, they sound when you in your brain, they're like, hey, it's okay to tell these stories. And then when they come out of your mouth, it's not okay. But so my 21st birthday, I was given as a present this leather jacket. People don't really wear leather jackets the way it was. I'm older than I want to admit, but this leather jacket was like lambskin. It was beautiful. It was like, and I wore this on my 21st birthday, and my friends from Cleveland, my buddy Tony Capone and Joe Giuliano, these real Italian dudes, took me out, and we went to downtown Cleveland, and I stole a bottle of blackberry brandy from my mother's
blackberry
liquor
brandy? Are you
first
a hobbit?
of all, let me tell you something. Basically, I was. Let me tell you something. This bottle probably predates the Egyptian civilization for how long it had been in my parents' liquor cabinet. So, like, Tony and them were like, hey, grab something. And then we called a cab. This is way before Uber. You had to wait like an hour for a cab, and some van shows up, and we're 21. And I thought we were old at 21. If you see a 21-year-old now, you're like, that's a child. Like, that's a kid.
Yeah.
So we get in this van, and I go to crack this blackberry brandy that probably came off like a liquor store shelf. We're not talking, well, anywho, it was
crap.
cemented. It was cemented with sugar. So in the back of this van, we were banging this bottle, and finally got it to like undo. We started drinking blackberry brandy on the way down to the downtown Cleveland in the flats. And we get there, and it's the first time we're all 21. I was like one of the later people to turn 21. And first thing that happened on this night was my friend got a bunch of shots of 151 rum to celebrate.
No.
And so we took a 151 shot. Oh, this is the epitome of what you don't do. But when you're 21, you think, wow, I got to really go big. And so we did 151. And then, a lot of the beers are like $1. So we're drinking beers, and stuff just keeps coming, and everyone's trying to like hurt me. And, but they also, 151 came again, and it was set on fire. And this is my buddy Joe Giuliano, who I hope is listening to this. He took a shot and set the table and part of himself on fire. And that was the beginning of this night. Towards the end, I had this leather jacket, and everyone's making fun of me for this leather jacket that I'm wearing. Like I was like Michael Knight from like Knight Rider in this jacket. Has 21. And we were ordering whiskey sours and all of these different things. And I had this bottle of blackberry brandy. And so every time we would go from place to place, we'd be passing it around like a bunch of like train riders or something, like riding the rails. And so I ended up in this, we had no way home. It was freezing cold. It was March in Cleveland, and there's a bunch of frozen slush on the road, and we couldn't get a cab. So we walked about 3.5 miles drunk in a way that is not okay. And when we hitchhiked, we got a guy to pull over, pick us up. And I ended up in this poor soul. He was like getting off his work at a bank, and very late at night, and he drove us home, and I started throwing up all over my new leather jacket.
Dude,
and it was blackberry brandy colored. And so it was like modern art all over this lambskin thing.
Ew.
the reason I'm telling this awful story is that the next 17 to 20 hours of my life were the worst 17 to 20 hours of my life you'd ever have, ever. I mean, couldn't get out of bed, throwing up occasionally, really like, it was just a baptism of fire. Definitely not the first time I ever drank, but it was the worst. It's still the worst probable hangover I've ever had to this day. And you would think, like, really? Why would somebody who did that start a streaming service that has to do with wine and food? It's not logical. I probably should have gone into accounting or something, but that's sort of my thing. But this lifestyle of traveling, going all over the world, it breeds a lot of positions you walk into that you don't know how much you're going to need to drink. When you're with winemakers and you're with different people and you're going to a dinner afterwards, you find yourself in the, like, how do you manage your life? And so hangovers have become a thing that I try to monitor, I try to understand, and it made me dive deep into the history. And so let's get into a little bit of, like, when humans became cognizant of what hangovers are and how they affect them. And I would like to apologize if my mom's listening for ruining that leather jacket that she got me. Oh. It was unbelievable. So, all right. So
major bummer.
This goes all the way back. I mean, it's probably earlier, but the first written thing that I could find in my research was the ancient Assyrians started talking about hangovers. Claire, did you find anything earlier than that?
No, I kind of went Romans. Romans was kind of, you found Assyrians. It's pretty good. I got Romans.
Well, what they found that when you drink a lot of things after what they called merriment in their tablets, they wrote it, they would feel like shit when you overdrank. And I'm sure what they drank was probably some pine resin wine mixed with whatever, herbs and who knows what would have been in that stuff. Mead, honey wine, it would have been stuff that had some sugar. But sure. They had some wild, and the ancient techniques for dealing with this is they would ground up birds' beaks and myrrh. And myrrh was one of those things, if you've ever heard of it, that's what the three wise men took to Jesus when he was born: frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Myrrh is like it's a plant with an essential oil, and it has like a gelatinous, crystalline thing that comes out of it that you can make into an incense. But it's a weird thing to think that they would think that would treat hangovers. I think the very first, and like the Mongolians would eat pickled sheep's eyes. And I think there's something to the pickle. I feel like
they would just do that for fun.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that the Chinese, probably in the ancient history, they are the ones who actually started to get this right. Their cure was doses increasing of green tea. So very strong green tea. And there may be something to that. We'll get to it later, but the caffeine is probably something that could help with hangovers.
Yeah.
It goes
maybe small amounts.
It goes all the way, and it keeps going to the Russians, which are very averse, at least in older times, to eating anything. Their whole thing is to get in a sauna, and apparently, to my research, if you were in the upper class, flatulating yourself with a birch branch to make blood flow. So,
freaking Russians, man. They're like, let us hurt ourselves until we feel better.
That's right. And it goes all the way until 1845, when a really famous for the wine and food world man, he's an Italian named Bernardino Branca. He invented something called Fernet. And one of the reasons he created Fernet was to deal with the adverse effects of a hangover. And Fernet has a whole bunch of things in it, aside from tons of alcohol. It has rhubarb, chamomile, aloe, cardamom, peppermint oil, a number of other things, and grape-infused spirits. So clearly humanity has been trying to figure out, what do we do about hangovers for a millennia? How do we treat this very strange phenomena that we seem to have a very short memory for when we get it, and we do it again?
Yeah.
Claire, that brings us to the modern era, which I love the idea of all of these different cultures having their own, this is my cure, this is my thing. Claire, what did you find in your research of what people are using to treat the almighty hangover?
Well, I found a lot of eggs, Jason. I have to say, I found a lot of eggs.
Eggs.
Which also goes back to the ancient Romans. They would do a raw owl egg. I don't know. I don't know. Sounds gross. But there was also introduced something called
egg.
Owl egg, very specific.
The Romans were really into these very specific delicacy stuff. They were.
Yeah. It's almonds and, you know.
I feel like you gotta know a guy for an owl egg. But
not in Rome. Those are pretty common, apparently.
Maybe so.
Because those people were hungover. And back to eggs. At the 1878 Paris World Exhibition, there was a concoction made that I believe people still drink today called the prairie oyster. Sounds delicious. And that is a raw egg, Worcestershire, Tabasco, salt, and pepper. So, some of the ingredients of a popular hangover treat for today called Bloody Mary, which I do quite enjoy when I'm hungover. I don't think it helps, but I still enjoy it. The Ritz-Carlton in the 30s introduced a hangover cure, and that was Coca-Cola mixed with milk. I don't think I want to try that.
Coca-Cola mixed with milk?
Yeah. So maybe, again, the little caffeine thing, maybe a little bit of that caffeine and also cocaine.
Well, there was cocaine in it then. That was those were the days, man.
And people do say cocaine helps with hangovers. It's true.
Which people say this? Who tells you this?
People who do cocaine. I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
That's
I swear to God,
good.
I don't. I swear to God, I don't.
People on the internet. All right. Well,
I know people who've done it, and they say that it helps.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, but one of my number one cures is Mexican Coke, which uses real sugar.
A lot of people
like the Mexican Coke in a bottle, that's like one of my number ones. But there's I have a whole regiment we'll get to. Yeah. So, all right. Any other things in the modern day?
Ernest Hemingway.
Ooh,
he liked tomato juice and beer. In modern day, though.
No, tomato juice and beer. So like we call that in Ohio where I grew up, and I'm sure other places, we called that a red beer. So you would drink a red beer, and it was almost always.
Isn't that close to a? Sorry.
No, it's close to like you were gonna say like a michelada or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But it's with a michelada, you have a lot of spice and pepper and other things that go into it.
Yeah,
lots of lime. Yeah. I mean, it totally depends. I mean, if it's a traditional, real Mexican michelada, it's going to be very different. But a gringo michelada just has other things besides. But I would say red beers were a staple for the like Sunday morning football games after a wild Saturday in college. Yeah. So I don't know if you ever experienced anything like that. But
Clamato with a beer, you've had that in Napa.
That's right. You've watched me.
I'm not saying you were hungover, but we were drinking the day before.
I think I was. It was that was after some shooting that we did.
I think this is interesting. In Puerto Rico, you'll find this remedy to be very common: rubbing lemon slices under your armpit before drinking supposedly counteracts dehydration.
Rubbing lemon slices under your armpits
before drinking.
Have you ever tried that?
I will next time. I'm going to try whatever the heck I need to try.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna look into this cocaine thing. It's interesting that you've.
You're in LA. It won't be hard.
All right. Anything else from a standpoint of hangover treatment?
Sex.
Sex. For hangover treatment. Why?
And it's interesting. My source is very. It's Cosmo. They say you wake up. It's Cosmo. They say that no matter how terrible we feel, we know that sex will probably make us feel better, at least temporarily. What better way to delay the suffering from last night's liquid damage than to have an orgasm?
That's it? There's no scientific basis? They're just saying
it releases, what is it, oxytocin or whatever, that makes you happy temporarily. So, yeah, temporarily it probably takes the edge off. So
that's just basically putting a Band-Aid on it by getting laid.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of health benefits to getting laid, so can't hurt. If you have a willing partner
who didn't drink the previous night.
Or maybe you both did. Help each other, It's teamwork.
All right. Well, that's a good one. I'll add that to my regiment. Oh, boy, that's amazing.
What about you? Okay. Have you found anything from more recent years?
Well, the big thing I think that you always see, and there are a couple things. One, you see the things in like gas stations or like the Rite Aid checkout counter. That's like your hangover situation. Have you ever tried any of those?
Not the things that are specifically targeted for that. I will say the stuff that seems to work best for me is always when I drink something like Pedialyte or coconut water before I plan on having a night, or have a night that I'm like, this might get intense.
This might get
and
spicy.
That helps. Spicy, yes.
I've never tried any of those, but when I was younger, in my mid-20s or whatever, whenever I'd have people over the house, my mom would all give us a vitamin B, before we went out.
That's supposed to help, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it just more made my pee really yellow. I'm not sure that it actually did anything for the hangover, but
that's cool.
I never know. I it's obviously there's like the big things that everybody can count on their hand. Greasy food the next day, and or just keep drinking. Have a beer in the morning.
Yeah, that's like the hair of the dog. If you're still drunk, you can't be hungover, right?
Oof. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I guess that's but you got me on a technicality there. And then there's and then there's also the pickled stuff, vinegar.
Yeah, a lot of pickled things.
I mean, it's something that I've seen and heard.
Yeah, in Poland, I think they drink just like pickle juice.
Yeah,
which I think is delicious. So
you drink pickle juice?
I would.
Okay, all right. I would recommend that after the sex, but all right. So, what's your relationship with any of these one treatments? Do you when you have an issue in the morning, do you go and do the greasy food? Do you do the bacon, the eggs,
I do.
The whole thing? Okay.
I do. I find that greasy food helps. My one of my dear friends is from a place in like Western New York, upstate Western New York, and they have something in that area called a garbage plate. Don't know if you've heard of this before.
I certainly have. I've spent a decent amount of time in a place where they serve those. Very famous for it. Yes, I know the garbage plate. It's disgusting.
Garbage
it's
plates.
Everything.
We did not have that in Illinois. We didn't. We had other garbage plates of garbage, but this is like literally layers of just like fries, nachos, chili, just onion rings. Just like smash it all together in a plate, and pray to God it helps.
Yeah, I think the greasy food, breakfast burritos, all that stuff sort of helps for me. I mean, I think that is one of the cures. I still stand by. Here's my regimen. If I have a hangover, and obviously the night before I try to drink water, we all know, we all listening to this know that it takes a discipline and a bladder and an ability to not have to wait in line for a bathroom to go shot for shot with water and drinks. That's very difficult to keep up. You start that way and you're like, all intentions lead, but then you're like,
you're in the bathroom most of the night.
Give me another gin and tonic. And so, I find that if it goes sour for me, the next morning, the very first thing, because generally if I have a bad hangover, I know it before the morning. I tend to wake up, feel like shit, and I can't go back to sleep. That's my biggest problem.
Yep.
But that's the moment I take Advil or I take some kind of anti-inflammatory. The second, because you don't want to do it the night, like when you go to bed. Obviously, alcohol and that stuff are kind of tricky to mix. But when you, well, I mean, I don't think it's, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think it's the best thing to do. But I think that, you get the Advil in you as early as you can. You chug as much water as you possibly can. I think you're probably very right, like on a Pedialyte or something that has electrolytes in it, Gatorade, any of that kind of stuff. Coconut water, which we all have laying next to our bed. And and then the next morning is crucial. This is very important. We're lucky I live in Los Angeles where you can get some of the best like Mexican street food type stuff. And my strongest recommendation is you get a Mexican Coke, and the difference between the Mexican Coke and the regular Coke is it doesn't use high fructose corn syrup, it uses sugar. And honestly, they taste better. It comes in a glass bottle, which is probably it's a placebo effect, but it tastes better because of that.
It totally does.
And so you get that, you drink that while you're waiting, and you get fried potatoes, like home fries, you get eggs, you get cheese, you get bacon. And if you can get it all together in a breakfast burrito, then you do that. I'm a big fan of spicy stuff. So you put as much spice on it as you can because it deflects your head thumping into your mouth burning. And
wouldn't that be an inflammatory though on your already inflamed everything?
I mean, probably, but at this point, I'm throwing up on my leather jacket. So it's true. So I would say I do that, and then midway through that, I try to get myself into a margarita or a beer with tomato juice in it. And so I do the like red beer or I do like a margarita, and the salt on the rim and the lime and all of that stuff. Maybe it's in my head, but these are the things that help get me back to normal. And then you go home and you either nap or watch something as mindless as possible, like sports, or
have sex,
or you have sex. Yes. Claire, what's your regimen? Do you have anything specific, or is it just sleep it off?
I love what you said because I like to do the same thing. I didn't think it was bad, but because I think it's a small dose, but I'll take like one like Motrin and pound some water before I go to bed. And then I'll either set an alarm or I always sleep. I mean, it's known you sleep terribly when you're shit-faced, right? So I usually wake up 4:30, 5 a.m., pop another one, chug some more water, and pray to God that helps. Or, the coconut water that I have next to me in my bed every night.
Next to my bed.
My young coconuts that I have a young man shucking and opening in the corner of my room. That sounds terrible. We'll cut that.
No, let's keep it.
And then, I'll generally do some like greasy food. During COVID, my roommate and I would drink a bit, as I think we all did, and we would order Firehouse subs, and I would get the turkey bacon ranch sub sandwich. Holy shit. It's also why I gained 25 pounds during COVID, but man.
You did not gain 25 pounds during COVID. That is not true.
Yeah, okay. But yes, greasy food. It's just the hydration, right? Like, and there's really no quick fix. Although I will say, I know a nurse and she's gotten those IVs where they inject you. Holy shit, I wish I could do that every day.
Yeah, we should talk about the IV situation. So now there's like this rise. There's a rise of IVs. When we were covering Aspen Food and Wine Classic, they had a tent
with different levels.
And mostly rich people where you could do this IV. Have you ever done an IV, Claire, for this kind of thing?
I have.
You have? Okay.
Yeah. What?
Did it work? Did it work? Were you hungover when you did it?
Yes.
How fast? How
within
fast?
The hour.
Oh, so
within the hour, like it took the edge off, and I was feeling pretty chill. Still tired, but yeah.
And so, what was your level of hangover? It was like 1 to 5. Because I'm curious if that's the solution for real.
I don't think it's going to help you with the real doozies, but I think those where you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm like tired and like I have a little headache and like I'm just feeling kind of like blah, but not debilitated. I think it's for those.
Well,
it's got a lot of potassium and sodium and saline, I guess, and stuff,
Yeah, I've never done the hangover. How did you get it, by the way? Did you order a service?
I don't want to say.
Oh my God, what do you have? You got a secret back alley you go to?
No, there's like a nurse connection in there and I don't want to shout anybody out.
I'm not asking you to pull out names. I'm just, so that's good enough. So someone who's a nurse who's able to smuggle black market medical supplies to you.
Perhaps.
when you're hungover.
Not all the time. It was just a one-time, like one-off special thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good friend. In my research, I've found there are almost countless books. There are, medical journals. There's all sorts of stuff. And there is an incredible nagging, persistent thing that we really don't actually know. I mean, it's really easy. Obviously, you're dehydrated. Obviously, some things, but there are some very difficult things to answer in which what it is. I mean, taking it back to history for half a second, it is definitely, it runs the gamut of people saying like, you're punished for partying, sometimes like by God. You're punished by, you got to think back in the ancient times, they wouldn't think like, oh, this must have to do with cell restriction and dilation and things like that. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking like, those stars above me are gods and why does the sun come up and all of these different questions. So it doesn't, it's not out of the realm of possibility that could be a higher power punishing you for the things that you've done.
Feels like it.
But now there is this whole like, these like anti-hangover pills and like Chaser. I don't know. These are names that I've never tried, but there's like companies called Chaser or Alcohol X. And these were developed to try to like stop this stuff. There's also this like Dawn 808, which is this like canned tea-based drink made from alder leaves, and it's supposed to break down alcohol. But all of this
it's already metabolized.
That's what I'm saying. All of these scientifically don't make any sense. So
no, if they worked, we'd know about them. No.
Well, if they worked, we'd all be using it. There would be like no reason to use another product. It'd be it.
No.
So like dropping an egg yolk into Worcestershire sauce and chugging it or something like that is fun. You look like you're not enjoying that idea.
No.
It's fine and all. I think what we should do, there's a neighbor of mine who is a doctor who I've thrown a few back with. His name's Will. Let's patch him in to see what he has to say. I mean, we're catching him pretty off guard with this. I barely mentioned to him we were going to do this, but I just want to see from a medical profession if they teach you this in med school, and if you have any kind of like actual.
Sure, it's top priority in med school.
Look, here's the thing. This is something that affects anybody who's ever drank. And to me, it's like, I don't know why they wouldn't teach us in med school. To me, it seems like a petri dish of like an easy way to look at a cause, come up with a cure or whatever. And I don't know of anything else that's like this in our society. So let's patch Will in and see what he has to say.
Yeah.
It's nice to have an actual medical professional on the podcast to shed some light onto what has been plaguing us for centuries. Dr. Will Kroom, this is also a person, while you're on this, is I've actually drank quite a bit with you. So you're an expert in both fields, which is
more drinking than medicine.
Yeah, that's the case. There seems to be a correlation between doctors and drinking. Am I wrong on this?
Yeah, I think we have an alcohol problem overall. Stressful jobs, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so Will, can you shed any light on what is actually happening to our bodies or why we get hangovers? Anything you can say from a medical standpoint? And before you do that, what is your actual field in the medical?
So I'm an orthopedic surgeon, so I would not say I'm a real doctor who knows the physiology of the body, but I'll take my best stab at it.
Oh, come on. You went to med school. You know the physiology of the body.
They don't teach hangovers in med school. I'm not sure why. They should.
I was gonna ask, because from what I understand, there's a lot of mystery. But what do you know about what's happening with the body, with every drink you take? What does it do to your body?
So what I remember, and again, don't quote me on this, this is remembering medical school 15 years ago, is that alcohol blocks a hormone called antidiuretic hormone. So as you can imagine, so diurese is to pee. So if you're anti-diuresing, it's stopping you from peeing. So if you're blocking that, you're peeing. So basically alcohol gets rid of all the fluid in your body. So I would say number one, that we can at least know medically why it happens, is you're dehydrated.
That's easy. There has to be more to it, because there have literally been nights where I'm like, all right, I'm going to match every drink with a glass of water. And I still can end up with a crazy hangover. Now, of course, it's 27 Miller Lights, but...
But I think the problem is, I think when it's inhibit, like when the hormones, you just lose it all, right? So I think in the time, while you have the alcohol in your system, it's all going out, and that's breaking the seal, so to speak, right?
Right. So you're not peeing out the alcohol, like that's not actually happening. Your body is doing what?
Losing all the fluid. I mean, there's a lot of other, fluid, water, and, drinking beer, right? So there's a lot of water in there. So you're getting rid of all the water. And whether you're keeping up with it, I think you just can't keep up when the hormone's inhibited.
It's just husking you out at an extreme pace, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we can keep up with it.
That tracks.
As a doctor, and I know you're, what are you drinking right now, Will?
So drinking a margarita. Chasing my hangovers that way. Drinking a margarita. So that's a strategy, right? I love it. No. The soft landing, if you will. Strategy.
The soft landing. So as a doctor, when you know you're going to have a night, and we all, even people who practice extreme moderation, there's every once in a while you're at a wedding, you're at something where you're going to have to do a little more than you normally do. How do you prep? Do you do anything to prep? And how do you deal with it afterwards?
I'm fearful of my hangovers. As I've gotten older, the hangovers keep getting worse and worse. So I say number one, I start fast early in the day, end slower. Where my wife, she ramps up at the end of the day. She, control issues, I guess.
Me too. Well, share that with your wife.
She's probably dealing with you coming back to normal.
Yeah, start fast, slow down. It's tough though. You know, that's a tough strategy. But I'd say just drink less, right? Tough. Strategy number 1, drink less.
Do you have any kind of technique? So let's say you messed up. You're not on call the next day, so it's not a concern. Well, how do you deal with it? What is your particular, I'm going to deal with this hangover?
Yeah, hydrate number 1. Just pound in water. And then I think go back to the soft landing. Start drinking a little bit.
Do you have any thoughts on, like, you see like all of these pre-made things you can get not the grocery, like gas stations that are like hangover preventative things. Is all this stuff bullshit? I mean, is there any way that any of these things work?
I think there's something to it. Obviously, you're going to feel better with like just ibuprofen, Tylenol, Aleve kind of medications, just as a pain reliever, anti-inflammatory. You're going to feel better that way. I think caffeine, if you look at our neighbor gave us a packet, an hangover packet when we had our neighborhood holiday shuffle.
Yeah, that was a rough morning.
Yeah, so that it was like Alka-Seltzer hangover. So I think it was like Alka-Seltzer, which I don't know what's in Alka-Seltzer, but it did have caffeine in it. Caffeine basically as a stimulant constricts the blood vessels, which is one of the thoughts to headaches. Basically, your blood vessels are dilated, more blood pumping into the brain and giving you a headache. So by constricting that, I think a lot of like migraine medicines have caffeine in it. So that's a good. But
then doesn't the caffeine dehydrate you more?
Yeah, so you could drink more water.
So what about the theory? What about the theory of taking an anti-inflammatory before you drink or towards the tail end of drinking? I know that there could be some other issues with that, but is that going to prevent anything or no?
Probably not. I mean, just from the duration of action. I mean, ibuprofen probably 4 to 6 hours. So if you're taking it the night before, it's wore off by the time, you wake up the next morning.
What about greasy food? Are you a guy who's like, I'm going to have bacon, I'm going to have eggs, I'm going to do the whole greasy breakfast, or no?
I'm not. I feel like hangovers are worse after you eat. I feel like all the focus then goes on your gut, and then everything starts hurting worse. I don't know. I've never been.
Oh, that makes sense.
I've never been I eat a huge greasy meal morning of, and I'm just like feel a lot better. I feel like I always feel worse.
At the risk of asking a stupid question, why do they get worse as we get older? Because I remember being, 22 and being able to do Irish car bombs out, and then the next morning I'm up for practice. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't have a great medical answer for that. I think it's just the joys of aging, right? We're not good healers as we get older. So the youthful body is resilient. The early 40 bodies in my case is not resilient anymore.
Now, when you go into the office,
we historically died at the age of 40, so we're not built to live past that. This is borrowed time.
I died at 40, but I just refused to get buried, so I'm still here.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing too is this whole IV, this like rise in like the home IV delivery, and like they have IVs at like Coachella now and all these events where people are going to be drinking and partying and doing whatever. My question to you is, I know an IV works. It's a pretty clear situation. You're pumping saline.
Hydration.
What's in it? What? It's just hydration, right?
Normally saline, so it's salt water. It's just balanced to the same osmolality. I don't know, is that the right word for it? Something, with your blood. So it's, it causes, if you do it a fluid that's not the right balance, it's going to cause you to lose more fluid out of the cells. So it's like the right balance of salt in there to stay within the bloodstream.
You don't have to name any names, but during your practice, have you ever seen any nurses or doctors come in and hook themselves up to an IV because they had a bad morning or a bad night?
I have not.
Because I always see that.
I'm sure someone's done it. I have not.
I always see that on like ER and shows that dramatize this, that somebody had a rough night, so they get a nurse to get them an IV before they have to go into surgery.
A nurse would be better at it. I mean, as doctors, I haven't started an IV since 15 years. I don't even know if I could start an IV, so I'm not the person to go to for that. But the nurses, they could probably hook you up. They know where the supplies are too.
I'll remember that after our next drinking episode. All right, before I let you go and we wrap this up, let me just ask if you remember the worst hangover you've ever had in your life. Do you can you recall anything where you're like, this was a day and a half I ruined of my life? And what did you drink?
Think of the specific one. Like, I've had many. You know, they've gone from 1 day to 2 days to 3 days. I think it's like mixed. It's I've maybe not many, maybe one, maybe two, but yeah, it just drags on. You just still don't feel right. You're like, this is day 3, and I'm not cooking on 100% here. But I think for me, it's just like mixtures, right? I don't the beer before liquor. I don't know if there's any science behind that. I don't know if you can say what's the order of a drink, but it's just like when you start throwing everything at it, wine, beer, every type of alcohol, things end badly. But it's just probably because you're drunker, maybe. I mean, it's probably just pure alcohol level related than anything.
It would have to be, because I can't imagine that it must be like sugar that's in there and different components, because it can't be mixing. It wouldn't make sense to me, because alcohol is alcohol, really. I mean, when it comes down to the science of it.
Right? Grains versus grapes versus agave. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone knows. But yeah, I feel like the mixing is bad.
It's a funny thing. Alcohol's been around as long as humans have been having conversations around a fire. And the funny thing is, we don't have a preventative measure to this moment to avoid it, aside from don't drink it, you know?
Yeah.
It's a mind-boggling thing to me.
And it's amazing to me, because I think most things, you know, I hate to say it, especially medicine in our country, it's all monetary driven, right? So there is a market for this, right? If a pharmaceutical company could come up with the hangover cure, I think it would be a blockbuster. But I just don't know, you know, the scientists for some reason haven't come up with it.
Well, this is great. It's nice to get a perspective that shows us what we do and what we don't know. Will, it's an honor to have you on. And I want to say thank you. It's great. Thanks, Will. I appreciate you joining in. I look forward to our next drink together.
Yeah. Thank you. Me too.
Thanks,
Have
Will.
a good one.
Claire, it's good to have a doctor on, even if you didn't really answer any particular questions. It's nice to know that doctors suffer from the same fate we do. And
it is. They don't have a secret.
And that our our money is going to a good place. So, well, I hope everybody on this day, New Year's Eve, 2023, I hope you're not hungover, but if you are, I hope that you're trying something new. And if you are finding something that's working, you know, ground up bird beaks with Worcestershire sauce and eggs dropped in, and sex and pickles and breakfast burritos and Mexican Coke. If you're trying all of those, let us know. We want to know what works for you. And honestly, I know this is going to sound crazy and you probably don't want to put this out publicly, but since I put my leather jacket puking story out in the public, hit us up on social media and let us know the worst hangover you've ever had and what that story is, because I'm dying to hear other people's stories now. And go to SOMM TV. 2023 is going to be an incredible year for us. I may be taking the rest of the day off to sleep and go from there. But Claire, to 2023.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm going to go refill my red beer.
Nice.
All right. Everybody be safe. Thanks for listening.